Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined alongside my co-host Jeff, as always. Jeff and I are writers and directors and passionate about the art of storytelling. Filmmaker Mixer is a creative hub where aspiring and established filmmakers come together to share experiences, insights, strategies, and inspiration.
Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, and today we are chatting with composer Trevor Hoffmann. Trevor has worked on projects like Lego Friends, My Little Pony, Strawberry Shortcake. So, Trevor, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
No, I'm excited. I love music. I love the art of composing for TV and film. But before we jump into that, I want to know more about you. What's your background? How did you get interested in music? Did that happen as a young child? How did that happen for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I started playing piano when I was 4, as many of us do, taking piano lessons, and from there went through the Royal Conservatory classical route. And so, at heart, I still feel like I'm a classical musician in many ways. But growing up, going through my teenage years, I did a lot of church music. I was also really into EDM, like electronic dance music, and had all sorts of influences. But as I was starting to go into university, I really loved film music because I felt like it really brought together all the aspects of and different genres of music that I had been, loving my entire life. And so I remember as a teenager printing off, biographies of film score composers and reading about how they got into the industry and, figuring out how my journey was going to work. But yeah, then I did, a stint music directing and went touring and again learned, dabbled in all sorts of different genres, classical crossover and Southern gospel. And eventually I started working in TV music primarily.
And how did you make that transition?
Well, I was actively searching for a more senior composer to work with because at that point I was 19 or 20 years old. And it felt like a logical step to do because that's, as young composers, we're often told to, find an entry-level job with a more senior composer. And I was introduced to a composer and songwriter named Daniel Ingram. And I started working with him as an editor and arranger on different projects.
And you were 19?
Yeah, 20 maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Wow, that seems young to make that big of a connection. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was very grateful, and it's just sometimes the pieces fall into place, and to be honest, at that point, it was Daniel is from among many other things known for My Little Pony and a lot of animations. He's an incredible songwriter and composer, and at that point, I'm like, okay, cartoons, that's cool. It's not necessarily my end goal. This is 20-year-old Trevor talking, but I, it was music. It was in the industry, and I knew I'd be able to learn a lot. And so that's where I really entered into the industry and started, getting to know how things worked. And from there, I developed a love of writing for animation and producing songs for animation. So I guess that would be the beginning of my film and TV journey.
Well, I'm curious about something. I'm always fascinated how artists bring their individual experiences to the art they're doing, the work they're doing. So I'm curious how your background in classical piano or electronic dance music or any of those other things you've done in the past, how does that influence you in what you're doing now?
Great question. Quite a bit. I mean, being an animation composer is incredible in the fact that every day you're doing something different. One day you're writing, more traditional orchestral score. The next day you're writing pop score. The next day you're writing a tango. The next day you're writing a ballet, a ballet piece for a dancer on screen, right? And the fact that I had all these genres that I had performed in, the classical music performing with orchestras and the EDM, really informed my knowledge of the different genres so that I was able to produce them when they came up in animation, which they inevitably do, because all these things, it seems like animation writers especially love to write these episodes that have like a dance off where they're going from like jazz to EDM to big band to disco, all within like 2 minutes sometimes, right?
Right.
So going back to your question, having all these experiences of performing live and, working with producers as like a session musician or whatever I was doing, I was able to directly take those skills back into my work as an animation composer. And, I like to think be more authentic with my productions.
Makes sense. No, that does make
Mhm.
sense. I'm curious about something else.
Mhm.
When you're doing a score, what's the process where you decide to let the music do the heavy lifting in a scene
Mhm.
versus like the action of a scene, if that makes sense? Is that something
Mhm.
you work with the director on to make those choices, or how do you balance those two?
Mm. Yeah, it really depends on the scene. If it is a tango scene, where
Obviously, you need a tango.
you need a tango, and you need it to be like right front and center, right? Like the music needs to be right in your face to drive the dance that's happening on screen. So in moments like that, we'll have a spotting session with the director, and that will, be decided that music is one of the central focuses of that. Many times the character's just chatting on screen, and in those cases, of course, we write it like a chat score, and you just want to be supporting the energy in a subtle way. And so I'd say about 75% of an episode that I'd score will be that sort of music, just supporting what's going on, and then maybe 25 will be a big action sequence where you want the music to be a bit more in your face, or something else that's specific, like the tango example.
Well, what's the process of actually creating the score? Do you use temp tracks? Do you like rough out a soundtrack first and then go back and forth with the director and the producer? What's the process like?
Yeah, for well, Lego Friends, for example, they do use temp tracks occasionally if they want to get a sort of an idea across. But generally, we have a spotting session with the director. We discuss all the different cues. Usually we kind of, I don't want to say ignore the temp track, but we get inspired by it, but still do what's best that
Right, right.
serves the scene. So every situation is different, I'd say.
Well, and we've talked to other composers and we've talked about spotting sessions before, but for young
Yeah.
filmmakers who might be coming up who are just now listening to this episode,
Mhm.
describe what a spotting session is.
Mm. Yeah, so spotting session is where we get a cut of the episode. Hopefully, it's a locked cut. It usually is, where everything is locked in place. Nothing's going to move, so we can sit down with the directors and the producers, or the project runners, and go through everything scene by scene, and we will discuss with the producers and directors what they want, and what sort of tones they want to hit here in different places, if there's specific emotions that they really want to highlight, which is key, especially in animation specifically, because sometimes there's something that's happening in the background of the scene, or a subtle emotion that maybe an animated face can't get across quite perfectly. So you need a little help from the music as well. So we'll go through the episode, find these spots, which is, I guess, where the word spotting comes from, I suppose. Never thought of that. Um, and then plan the whole episode out. And we would take that then, and with our notes, usually we do it in Pro Tools and have a lot of different notes, and then we'll take it and we'll start filling in the pieces and all the different cues of the music.
Well, I'm curious also about style, I guess I'll call it, or maybe
Mhm.
maybe branding is the right word. I'm not sure, but if you're working with, say, a Disney versus a Netflix versus Hulu or whoever,
Mhm.
do you have to change up styles based on the network you're working with, or does that even make sense?
I'd say it's a series by series.
Okay.
Not necessarily network, but definitely series by series, because every different series is has a different age level. Some of the series we've worked on are aged, a bit down. And one thing that is important is that you never write down to a younger audience.
What do you mean?
So,
Yeah, explain that.
so and we've done a lot of preschool projects over the years, and a lot of times when you think preschool, you think of Little Rainbow, ding, 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 really aging it down. But what I found is that young listeners are a very savvy audience, and there are moments where you want to have gentle music. Parents want to have gentle music playing in the background, but a lot of times kids really like the bumpin' music. And so, when we're designing a template, a sound for the sound of the show, and deciding what sort of grooves to use, if we're going to be using more electric guitars, more synths, so, we never try to write down to our audience and make it feel like preschool. We always kind of age it up because that's what a lot of young kids think is cool anyway.
Interesting. That makes sense.
But every series is different. One of the things that I love to do is create the sound world for each series.
Well,
That's my absolute favorite thing to do.
explain that. Yeah, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You're talking about like the world of music that the sh series is working in? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just the template and the feel of the music in each show. Similar to movies, you think of, the difference of like Lord of the Rings to Blade Runner, two very opposite ends of the spectrum. The textures of the music in those are very different. And in animation music, it's the same way in many cases. And a lot of the series will have very different textures and different styles of music. So Lego Friends, for example, is a combination of orchestral music, largely pop-based EDM, which goes back to my EDM roots because we had a very strong EDM, specifically an artist named Avicii, who is kind of a very bright EDM pop artist. His style really worked with Lego, and so a lot of the score was based around that sort of bright, energetic pop sound. Um, Whereas, Nurture, which is another video game that I'm working on right now, it's geared towards a much younger audience. And so when I was programming that one, they wanted a largely synth-based score because it just worked with the characters. And so with that one, it's less pop. It's more sort of soft synths and light orchestral elements. And what that does is it just creates a texture and a feel for the show so that when you, or in this case, a game, when you log into the game, you get immersed more in the world. And that's really my goal as a composer is that whether you're watching Lego Friends or Billy Bust Up, one of the other games working on, or Nurture, is that you get in there and it feels like a familiar sound world, and it supports, of course, what's going on in the story, but um, it's just a big tool in the immersive storytelling process.
Well, I do want to talk about computer games and video games in a second and the music for those. But before we do that, I'm curious about this world building.
Hmm.
When you're looking at, and maybe you can use a specific example if you want to, when you're looking
Hmm.
at a program, what informs you on how to build that world?
Hmm.
Why would you make one set of choices versus another set of choices? Is it the style of the animation? Is it the color palette? I mean, what are you looking at that's inspiring you?
Yeah. Yeah, first it's a talk with the director, as we discussed earlier, and seeing if they have a vision for it, because we
Right.
always want to support the director's vision. If the director, kind of gives us license to do what we feel is best, I will look at the what type of show it is. Luna Chip and Inky is another show we did for Knowledge Network a little while ago, and that one was very based in nature. It's actually based in BC mainly, and so they're outdoors. They have mountains, they have their oceans and eagles and beavers and all sorts of things. And it was very nature based. And so for a show like that, the obvious choice is to use mainly acoustic instruments because having a bunch of synths playing in that sort of setting
Right.
on screen would just feel kind of out of place. So that one was largely like folk based, did a lot of mandolins, guitars, orchestra, that sort of thing. Lego Friends is more, city based, you get more high school stuff. So pop music there and EDM feels much more appropriate. Barney, we did an episode of Barney a little while ago. That one, changed because they, at first they were in sort of just a school setting. So, kind of generic, pop star music, but then they go to space, and then you get to do like space music with theremins. Again, going back to the idea that animation, like within one episode, you're doing all these different things. Um, so yeah, it really has to do with the characters, the energy on screen, and the settings on screen as well. Like in the case of Luna Chipiniki and the nature, and that really informs the type of palette that I'm using with my instruments.
Well, pivoting over to video games in the gaming world, how is composing for games different, if it is, than
Mm,
for television.
mm. Yeah, I mean, games have the interactive quality, which is the really big difference between linear TV episodes and games. And so in the past 3 or 4 years, I've been delving a lot more into game music, which has been a blast. It's been a lot of fun. And the interactive quality is quite a challenge, but it's a challenge that I really love because there's so much more you can do with it. And when you're writing for interactive, you have layers of different things depending on, if you're in a boss level and things are getting really dramatic, you add more drums, or if you have a victory, then it kind of goes to positive victory music.
Are,
And what,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, not to interrupt. Are you saying that within a certain level of the game, depending on the skill level of the player, different sounds are coming through? Is that what you mean? Or explain that. I
Um,
didn't quite understand.
Yeah, so not necessarily the skill level of the player, but how the player is doing in the game. If
Oh,
they're
okay.
if they're losing against the boss, things start to get worse and the music starts to get more dramatic. If they are winning or have like land a good attack move or whatever, then things start to move more positive. And the music has to be able to adapt to all these things, or if they complete a section, has to be able to seamlessly go into the next portion of the song. Billy Bust Up, for example, is a song that Daniel Ingram, Daniel Ingram, the guy I started working with, we're still working closely together, and he's the songwriter for Billy Bust Up. And I've been producing the orchestrations and producing the songs, and also programming them into the game, which has been something I've been learning quite a bit about lately because the as a composer, if you're able to help the game developers with the what we call the middleware, which is kind of the link between writing the music and then them putting it in the game, um, it gives you a lot more flexibility as a composer. So basically, you're pre-programming the music so that the game developers can take it and hit the beats properly. Is the simpler way of putting it.
I want to unpack that a little bit because
Yeah.
I've never had this conversation before. It's fascinating. When you
Yeah.
say what do you call it? The middleware
Middle, yeah, middleware is a type of software. Usually it's Wise or Fmod, are the two big programs out there.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say you're balancing the score you're creating with the
Mhm.
programmers who are explain that a little bit, like the rhythm of the game, or what do you mean
Yeah,
exactly?
exactly. So you can imagine a boss battle, where you're firing, torpedoes at a dragon or whatever may be happening on screen, and whatever's happening on screen needs to interact. The music needs to interact with it, and that informs what is happening next. And basically, the game needs to communicate with the music to tell the music what to do, and the middleware software is how you do that. Um, and I found that as before I knew much about middleware, we would just hand the music off in the stems and hope that the game developers would know what to do with it. And sometimes it worked, but it's very complex, right? And when you're producing it, you have an intimate knowledge of how the beats should line up, what works with what, when this should go into the next section, and you're able to tweak it again for a more immersive gameplay. And that's a through line here for sure is just being more immersive. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, I started learning more about this middleware. So instead of just, creating the music, handing it off, hoping it works well, I have more of a hand in making sure that it works well and it's integrated as well as it could be, and I'm able to tweak it until it fits perfectly within the game.
And is that like a programming thing when you're actually are you programming the songs you're writing into a certain okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's exactly. I mean, it's not programming where you're doing lines of code,
Right.
but it used to be before middleware came around, which is, yeah, I can't even imagine, how that went back in the day. But now they have this middleware, which is incredible tools, and you don't need to know how to, code specifically. They have programs where you can program it in a much more uh, just you're able to do it in where we can see what you're doing and adjust things accordingly, and it makes it a lot easier to do.
And when you're working on those things or on a video game, for example, are you looking at storyboards or animatics or what are you scoring to at that point?
Mm. Well, for Billy Bust Up, we're involved mainly in the songs, and Daniel writes the song. He has a chat with the directors of the game. Katie and Ash are incredible. They've designed this whole game, and I could talk about it for hours, which I won't right now. But it's an incredible game. One of the most anticipated games coming up this next year. So we're excited to be a part of it. And Daniel will have a creative chat with them, and then Daniel and I will have a much more extensive creative chat just about building the sound world, what sort of genre this is, and then we'll have an idea of the scope of the song and take it from there, write some demos, see how it's feeling. Um, and Daniel will write the demos, I'll produce them, and then we'll adjust it, see how it's feeling, and go back and forth with the developers until it gets right, and then they'll animate to that. It's a bit different than writing underscore because songs are typically done right at the beginning of the process, almost right after the scripts, whereas underscore is done at the other end of the process when everything is typically locked.
Interesting.
So that's been our unique experience with Billy Bust Up is that it's a musical in a video game, and so all the songs were written way ahead of time, and then we're kind of tweaking them and recording them as we go.
Interesting. Well, Trevor,
Mhm.
before we wrap up, how can people follow your career and see what you're up to next? And are you like a social media guy, or do you have a website people can check out?
I wouldn't consider myself a social media guy, but I do social media, and have an Instagram that I try to post fun and interesting things about the life of being an animation composer, which is mainly what I do now. Just because it's not something that is that common, I suppose, and a lot of people watch animated shows and don't think about the music as much, and I love to just kind of shine a bit more of a light on what myself and other animation composers do. So I've posted some fun videos on Instagram and YouTube. And then of course I do have a website, trevorhoffmanmusic.com, which has a lot of work that I've done there as well.
And what's the Instagram handle?
It's also Trevor Hoffman Music.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Trevor, this has been fun. Like I said,
Yeah.
I love music. I love composing. It's a mysterious and magical world to me. So I appreciate you
Mhm.
jumping on the show and chatting about that creative process.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, man. You take care.
Okay. You as well. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping, and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.